4 o'clock, so we've got another couple of minutes to go. So one of the things that we often do on these events is start a little bit early, because we've got some of our regular viewers joining us today, and they like to see what we've been up to during the week. And it's become a tradition to have an unboxing on the webinars, the Elektor webinars. This week, I've already unboxed the unboxing, so all that's left is the contents. And I just wanted to show this off here. This is the Almit Compendium 4.0, and if you're interested more about soldering and the challenges associated with soldering, getting a high quality for safety critical systems, safety critical devices, learning more about flux and all the other aspects of solder, this is the book for you. It's available for free from the Almit website. If anyone's interested, we can share the link later on. Just put in your details and they'll send you a copy. But it's got some great insights here. This is one on the soldering process and the fact that during soldering, bubbles can occur in the solder between the component and the board. That's called a gaseous inclusion. And there's actually some development going on, or that's occurred in the reflow soldering process. So there's a vacuum reflow soldering process, and the interesting thing there is that process helps to remove those gaseous inclusions, and we can sort of see that there on the picture. The top version and the bottom version shows the improvement that can be included there. There's also loads and loads of insight on just on everything to do with solder, the materials themselves, the chemical processes that are behind it. And I think it's really, really good. I think grab our solder and just use it, because that's what we have to hand, and don't really take much time to think about it. But at the end of the day, the solder's an electrical process, it's a chemical, and it's also a mechanical part of our circuit design. So a great resource there. So feel free to jump in and order yourself one of those. So with that behind us, it's now turned 4 o'clock. So I'd like to welcome everybody today to this Elektor webinar. And what we're going to be looking at today is how industry leaders approach sustainability, how they support startups, and how they've managed to get through the chip crisis thus far, because obviously that hasn't finished yet. And as we move through the show, these are things we're going to be looking at. I've written an article on the chip crisis to see why it's occurred, what problems it's causing for industries, and to try and find out from a few industry insiders how that is actually going to end. So we'll look at that and tell you more. And we've also got some guests here with us today. We've got a mixture of industry leaders who are supporting our Productronica Fast Forward Award this year, which is done in conjunction with the Productronica exhibition, which takes place at the end of November. And we've also got a startup representative here as well to find out more about the challenges that startups face, to see what their insights are as well. And another aspect that's new for this year at Productronica is our World Ethical Electronics Forum, which is being run by Elektor. So we'll be talking a little bit more about sustainability, ethics, and what all that means in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals as determined by the UN. So we'll also bind that into our discussion up today with a question and answer section. So as you're listening, make note of any questions you have. We'll open up for questions and answers later. Your questions, and we'll be going through those. We'll have a couple of questionnaires so you can participate, and we can find out what's going on at your end, how the chip crisis is affecting you, what you think about ethics and sustainability. So please participate in those, and we'll add that to the conversation too, and look forward to having a great show with you all today. So who have we got with us today? So we've got two sponsors of our Fast Forward Awards. The first is Benjamin Klingenberg. He's the Managing Director of NCAB Group in Germany. NCAB Group is a company providing printed circuit boards. And Benjamin himself has been in the industry for a long time in various roles, mostly focused on printed circuit board technology. We also have Fabian Mendel. He's works for the company Almit. It's a family-run business, and Fabian is going to be moving into the management role of the business next year, together with his brother David, as their father goes into retirement. So there'll be a nice smooth handover there. Our other participant today is Felix Plitzko. Felix is a CEO and one of the founders of the company Eisler. They look at simplifying the manufacturing of electronics by making hardware less hard. So we'll be talking to him and finding out what it's like to be a startup, what sort of support's out there, what he's learned, what to avoid. And obviously you can post your questions to him as well and find out what advice he might have you for your startup ideas. And myself, I'm Stuart Cording. I'm an electronics engineer, and I'm a regular technical contributor to both Elektor and Elektor industry. I've worked in the semiconductor industry for over 20 years, and my main passion is embedded systems and microcontrollers. So there we have it. Let's get started. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to Benjamin Klingenberg for joining us today. How are you doing?
Yeah, great. Thanks for the invitation. Happy to meet you guys again.
Good. It's great to have you on. So what we'd like to do as one of our sponsors of the Fast Forward Awards at Productronica this year is to learn a bit more about NCAB. What's your area of business? What do you do? What can people expect from you?
Yeah, what do we do? NCAB is a Swedish company. We are a stock-listed company, and our business is exactly what my colleague Kenneth on this picture holds in his hands. It's printed circuit boards. We produce them sustainably, without any faults, on time, with zero defects. That's our mission. And most of our PCBs come from Asia, respectively China, but we are also spread over the whole world, including European locations and North American locations.
Now that's interesting. Obviously, you're based here in Germany, but you know, as I'm not myself not in circuit board design, obviously I use circuit boards. I've had a few built, but you get the feeling, especially when you look online and when you get inquiries over LinkedIn, which happen almost every week, you get the feeling that PCBs only come from Asia. Is that really the case?
Yeah, I would say so. It's not only, but the majority by numbers. It's definitely the case when we consider the history of printed circuit boards. It has been invented quite a few decades ago, but in the years when China opened the door to the world economically, plenty of Western companies moved there as an extended workbench to use the low salaries and low costs, and it is emerging, getting more and more from China, and I would say half of it nowadays comes from China.
Okay, so when someone's in a position to sort of currently developing a new design and getting started, or even a startup, maybe it's their first ever product that they're bringing to market. What's your recommendation to an organization as to when they should involve a potential PCB supplier in their development process?
Yeah, if you are in control of the PCB layout, the PCB design, our suggestion is to do that as early as possible. The printed circuit board is a unique product, specialized on the specific end product, and so there are plenty of things that can be done right in the early stage of design, routing, layout, material choice, stack up. So that's why we have a high share of engineers in our team to support the customers exactly from the beginning.
I just noticed on this picture that we have on the slide here, we've got the HDI design guidelines. Is that like a poster or something that customers can receive from you, or is that information you share?
Yeah, that's one of our design guidelines. So we have HDI design guidelines for flex rigid, IMS boards. We are right now working on a solution that also is connected to sustainability with the laser depaneling, how to design a printed circuit board panel that you are able to depanel it with a laser to save of course, material, because you can move PCBs closer to each other, which is a sustainable approach. There are also plenty of providers of such machinery on the productronica, by the way. So it's definitely worth going there. And yeah, you can get those as a poster. You can get them digitally from our webpage. That's one of our service, and our engineers can tell a lot more about it.
Super. That's great. I think tools like that are really, really helpful, and I really appreciate suppliers who go to the trouble of putting all that knowledge into a package like that, such as the book we were looking at earlier, and also these sort of posters. Now, of course, I think if any of our participants today have ever made their own circuit board, they know that one of the ways of manufacturing it is obviously using chemicals. You use an acid to etch away the copper. There's obviously a lot of chemicals used anyway, and lots of fumes generated as part of that process. So you'd sort of be probably thinking, well, you know, can PCB manufacturing ever be sustainable? How do you deal with that at NCAB?
Yeah, NCAB does a sustainable approach since long time already. It's not triggered by trends, I would say, or movements like Fridays for Future. We do this since quite a while. It's a part of our DNA. It's a part of our way of thinking. And yes, I fully agree to what you said. The printed circuit board production, as at least the subtractive production, is connected to a lot of chemicals. But of course, not every production is the same. I mean, you can drive a car that has a consumption of 3 or 4 liter gasoline, but you can also drive a car with 20 liters gasoline. So it's our responsibility also, in our opinion, to choose the PCB production that has the lowest consumption or has the highest focus on sustainability. And in our idea, sustainability is not only connected to sustainability in terms of saving CO2, using less chemicals, having a clean wastewater, and so on. It also depends on working sustainable with employees, with human beings, taking care for human rights, ethics, and so on. So I also like the approach that Elektor is running with the ethics and electronics. I think it's time for that. And on the other side, it's of course important to have a sustainable business for all parties. So we have these 3 areas: sustainable for environment, sustainable for the people, and sustainable for the business. And that's our sustainability approach.
It's really interesting that you raise that, and we'll be talking about the World Ethical Electronics Forum a bit later on. But I agree with you; it's a really interesting topic and something I think is of growing importance. And of course, the last 18 months have seen a lot of disruption due to COVID. Electronica last year, and also Embedded World was cancelled as exhibitions. And you know, I think we're lucky to have productronica available this November to attend. What's it been like for NCAB, and you know, what sort of changes have you been making due to COVID?
Yeah, COVID. I mean, I'm working with printed circuit boards since 21 years, and I was used to say, well, that was a crazy year, but next year it will be better. I stopped that.
Okay.
I stopped saying next year will be easier and not that turbulent. So yeah, it was a year or a few years that were unique, and yeah, our major focus is connected to the sustainability part, or at least 2 pillars, so to say, out of it. It's to secure the business, to secure the people, and that's what we did. We of course, our business model makes it quite easy to send people to their home office. We provided them with self-tests and masks and everything that's needed. And of course, with the isolation comes along also responsibility of an employer to take care for the psychological well-being of people, that you move out of the environment, out of a situation like you see on the right picture, people interacting, and you isolate them at home. Yeah, we did a lot of things like care packages that we sent to our employees as a surprise. We started more and more with video conferences. We had it in the beginning. We got more in contact with our customers with webinars. We started more communication with newsletters, and of course the business was impacted. There were no flights going out anymore, so and especially also no flights coming in from China. So all the belly freight in the passenger flights is missing as capacity, and it's still missing. So it was a big impact.
Exactly. So, I mean, I think when we sort of talk about startups as well, now is an especially difficult time to be starting a business because obviously the personal interaction is not there. The opportunity to go to an exhibition and see lots of exhibitors and new products and systems and solutions, it makes it much more difficult to do the normal inquiries that you would make on a business basis in a regular year. So explain a little bit more about why NCAB has decided to support and sponsor the Productronica Fast Forward Awards.
Yeah. So I fully agree. I mean, it's a special time, and it makes it more difficult to approach customers and potential customers, and it makes it maybe even more difficult because we have a allocation situation in many business areas. So in such situations, most of purchasers are busy with troubleshooting and firefighting rather than auditing or qualifying a new supplier or checking a startup. So in our opinion, one of our values is full responsibility. And I think we are also, as a well-being company, it's our responsibility to give back a little bit in our ability as we can, and to support startups to emerge and to grow and to have a chance, as it has been maybe 5 years ago, or as it will be hopefully in 5 years in the future again. And we are very happy to do that. And I have checked some of the videos this morning, and I have to say, wow, there are really interesting approaches in there, and I'm excited to meet these people on the exhibition.
That's good news, because obviously one of the reasons you've joined us today is actually because you're a jury member on the Fast Forward Awards as well. So what I wanted to ask was, what is it for you personally that's going to excite you? What's going to jump out, and what are you looking for in these business plans that people have submitted?
Yeah. I work for NCAB for a reason, not only to get my paycheck in the end of the month. I mean, that's also nice to receive, but I work there because I fully identify to the values and the way we work with employees and customers. And I think my idea of looking for the participants' ideas and so on is also connected to that, because I identify with it. I mean, in my opinion, it should be, it should give an added value for something. It should give an added value for the humans. May it be direct, as you see on the right side here, as a supportive device medically, that you can measure your sugar without hurting your skin, or on the left side with renewable energy, which is an indirect or maybe a delayed impact on human beings, saving our environment. So I really love ideas that follow these ideas. And of course, as a startup, you also need to have a clear idea how you can implement this idea, how you can scale it, and how it can be made profitable and reach the customers you need to make this product known on the market.
Super. Well, we're looking forward to having you there.
Thank you.
At Productronica for the Fast Forward Awards. So the Fast Forward Awards themselves will take place on the 18th of November. That's when the jury will sit together and choose the winner. And I'll tell you a bit more about the Fast Forward Awards shortly. I'm just going to, because I'd just like to say hi to everybody who's joined. We've got people in from Argentina and Greece, Bahrain, Belgium, United States, Johannesburg, Finland. So thanks everybody for joining in to our world audience as usual. And since you're also active, I'm actually going to open up the Q&A session. So if you move into the chat box, you'll see that there's an opportunity to submit questions. If you could submit any questions you have in there, that would be fantastic, and we'll get round to answering those later. So yeah, take time as you're listening to a presentation. If anything jumps into your mind, post a question and we'll take a look at it later. So thanks very much, Benjamin, for your insights and a bit more background and detail on NCAB and the sponsorship of the Startup Awards. It's great to hear all of that from you. I'm going to move on now to Fabian Mendel. Thanks also for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, as we saw earlier, Almit's area of business is in solder. I think for me, at least, as just an engineer that also on the side does sort of hobby electronics and development. Typically, I think I've embarrassingly still got some leaded solder left over from the 1990s. I grab out of the drawer just because the reel isn't finished yet. But obviously, solder, as I already mentioned at the beginning, it's a lot more solder about electrical connectivity, it's about mechanics, and it's also about chemistry. So could you tell us a little bit more about Almit and the business?
Yeah, of course. And yeah, you mentioned it. There is still a lot of leaded soldering material in the market, especially in the home use or in hobby use. But when it comes to Almit, that's exactly when we came on the stage, actually with a change from leaded to lead-free solder,
right.
Especially in Europe. Almit Germany was founded in the year of 2000. It was just the beginning of the big change from leaded to lead-free material in Europe. I mean, nowadays it's almost forbidden in every process. Only some military or really very critical processes in the car industry or medical industry, there you have some excuses, but yeah, let's say 95% is really forbidden to use leaded material. And yeah, we focus on these lead-free solder wires, solder pastes, also solder bars, and pure fluxes. Our material, which we supply here in Europe, is mainly produced in Japan, Tokyo, but we also have 4 or 3 other plants in Shanghai, in Thailand, and also in Korea. But for example, Korea, the whole plant is only manufacturing for Samsung and LG, because they are so big and they use so much material. If you compare, for example, the yearly amount of Siemens here in Germany, they use more or less 6 tons per month.
Wow. Okay.
In Europe, and for example, only LG uses 20 tons per month. So it's a huge amount what they produce in Asia, because all the electronic industry has moved to Asia. So that's why we have all our plants over there, of course.
Yeah.
But still in Europe, there's a lot of manufacturing, especially automotive, and that's what we supply here from Europe.
Okay, so as I said, I mean, I've been pulling out my old roll of solder for over a decade now. I'm sure of it, but it occurred to me that really we should probably take some more time to get to know our solder supplier and maybe even get some advice. What sort of advice and support do you provide with customers as they're selecting solder products? Yeah,
there are some very critical aspects when it comes to choosing a solder material. Doesn't matter if it's a solder wire or a solder paste, but I have pointed out it here with solder wire. For example, the most important thing is to have a really continuous flux core. I mean, every wire has a flux core inside, and it's the production process of a solder wire is very difficult. It's very difficult to prepare the flux that there is no humidity inside and no air bubbles or anything, because we call it the marriage. when you like marry the solder wire or the metal with the flux.
Right.
And in this production process, it's really critical that there is no air or humidity coming inside the flux, because only a very tiny air bubble in the beginning can be a huge like a huge line in the metal without flux, because it's getting thinner and thinner.
Yeah.
So that's a really critical process, and we from Almit, we guarantee to have a 100% stable flux core. There is on the market, you can also find products which say we have, for example, 2 or 3 cores or 5 cores.
Yeah.
But that's only because they cannot guarantee 1 core. So they put in there more cores, so at least 1 can be there maybe. We have only 1 core, but we can guarantee it's 100% there. And that's the most important issue when it comes to soldering, especially automatic soldering, because the robot will not stop when he finds out it's not wetting. The solder user itself, he can maybe put some wire off, but the robot won't, so he needs 100% flux core. Also, when it comes to wetting, you see the little solder joints in the bottom. The flux has to be really continuous and homogeneous quality. Also, we have a special alloy developed to save soldering tips. You can really you can really reduce the total cost of ownership by saving tips. I just drink something.
Just take a moment to grab something to drink. I think that's interesting. It's also something I've noticed myself as well, that the solder tips wear over time, and that was a surprise. It's quite interesting to see that have those 2 tips side by side, same process but with different solders. What an impact that has. So obviously, I think when most people are soldering something together, the solder that's to hand is probably good enough. But there must be some applications, as you were saying before, like medical, aerospace, automotive, maybe where safety is involved. Which of those applications are the most challenging for a solder supplier, and where do you have to provide the most technical support?
Nowadays you can find many high technical soldering processes in the market. Very new is, for example, the jet printing process. Very typical was for soldering with solder paste was the SMD process, to just have a printing process of the paste with a stencil. But especially when it comes to very tiny components, it's difficult to print. So there's a new process which is called jet printing, and you can really compare it to a like normal printer where you print your documents. And the I'm just missing the English word for tinte.
Ink.
The ink is shot like very fast on the paper, and the same happens with the solder paste. Actually, you shoot the solder paste very, very fast on the PCB where it belongs, and then afterwards you put there the components. And if you can imagine when you shot the solder paste, it's a very high pressure and it's very fast. So the solder paste really has to have very special needs that the metal and the flux is still there where it should be, and not like splashes all over the PCB. You cannot do it with a normal solder paste. You need a very special composition, and the flux is doing there a lot of work. Same for laser soldering. Laser soldering was really one of the key technologies for Almit. I think we can almost say we developed the first laser soldering materials. Of course, now in the market there are many companies who can do it, but it's very important to have a very special flux because you can imagine a laser beam. It's so much energy and so much heat in like seconds or milliseconds on the metal, and it's really important to have also here a very good flux which does the work with the metal, and that you don't have splashes and so on. And also through-hole soldering, also the flux is very important. So all of those technologies or soldering processes, what I'm talking about, it's not really the metal which is critical here. The metal you need maybe for you need for temperature or for the solder joint to make it a special to make it like crackless. But for the process, it's really important to have a good flux. And we develop our flux, for example, ourselves. There's nothing purchased. I think of the top 15 solder producers, I think there are 5 who produce their own flux. So it's really complicated to do it. And for example, in our development, it's very interesting. There are only 2 people in the whole Almit environment who know the complete recipe of our flux.
Oh, really?
So it's like Coca-Cola. It's really top secret, and because it's so important, and also our
unique,
our core components.
Exactly. It's surprising to see through-hole soldering on that slide as well, because obviously that's been around for so many decades in manufacturing that you think that sort of soldering challenge is easily handled nowadays. But interesting. So COVID-19, what's that been like, and how has Almit's approached the challenges over the past 18 months?
Yeah, like Benjamin already said before, the biggest thing was the anti-socializing point. You were stuck at home. As a company, you had to rearrange all your processes, how to work together, how will the tasks be done, how do the teams work together online, and that was a very big challenge on the one side, but on the other side, it was connecting us in another way more and more, because you had to really be sure that you can rely on your team. It gave us actually our team went more together during this time. And for me personally, for example, Corona was not really so bad, because in 2019 I worked maybe, I don't know, 70 or even more hours a week, and also because the traveling was crazy, and during Corona, not traveling anymore. So the life got a little bit more focused on the important things, and that's, I think, the main point. When it, of course, talking about working is a different thing, but also in private, you were able to focus on what is actually really important, and especially the work-life balance was, I think, a win in this during this time.
Yeah, I agree. So again, you're also one of our sponsors for the Fast Forward Awards. Why does Almit consider startups to be so important, and what drove you to then participate as a sponsor?
It's a very special thing actually for us. You can see here part of our team here in Europe or in Germany. And you can see we are a really young team. Actually, most of the employees are even younger than me, and I'm 31. So that's
Wow.
I think that says a lot about our company philosophy and our how we work together.
Mm-hmm.
And for us it's important to support young people. We have many trainees in our company. We always try to build our own workforce and not buy in so much of the human capital. And besides of that, actually, I by myself founded also a startup 5 years ago. So it's also for me a personal thing to support startups, and I know how they feel. I know what are the challenges, and even besides of doing the successorship of Almit, I'm working as a startup entrepreneur, and it's a very interesting task, and I like it very much. So I also like to support them, of course.
Super. Well, thanks very much for all your insights, and thanks also to both of you for supporting the Fast Forward Awards. For those of you who've never heard of the Fast Forward Awards, it's a startup award that Elektor organises in alternate years with either Productronica or Elektronica, and it's open to any startup that is less than 6 years old. The Fast Forward Award that's associated with Productronica is focused on any company, any startup that's focusing on developing products or prototypes in electronic production. And we assess the business model, the outlook, and we're also looking for any examples of what's been created thus far to try and understand what those startups need. And primarily, those startups should also be looking for some financing to help them along. In total, there's 3 prizes up for grabs of 15, 25, and 50,000 euros in form of a marketing package from Elektor to help them on their way and let them sort of break out into the wider world and establish themselves. And that's a great introduction into our next guest, who's Felix Plitzko. Hi there, Felix.
Hi there. How's it going?
It's good.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us.
Had to push that button.
Exactly. Just plugging himself back in again. So you're one of the CEOs and founders of Eisler, and what I was interested to start with is to find out how did Eisler come about? What drove you to form a business in the first place, and how did that process go?
Okay. Thanks again for the question. It's a great question because we have to go back a little bit. Well, in the first place, it was coincidence. We're 2 founders, and 2 founders. We met in 2014 at a local barbecue in Aachen, actually, quite close where we have our company now. And we sort of realized that there are some fundamental things going wrong in the electronics manufacturing space when it comes to the handoff between engineers and let's say scaled up production. And we want to solve this because in the end, the engineer he just wants to design the products of tomorrow, or she wants to design the products of tomorrow, and they don't necessarily know about the production process. But any change they do in their design, well, that screws up a lot of things in the later stages. And so that was our initial idea, is basically, okay, we want to sort of find a way to make that fluent, make it simple for engineers to have their supply chain in their fingertips, and hence put them in control instead of, let's say, purchasing departments. And well, have them be the creative geniuses and have them shine along the way when they create the products of tomorrow.
Super. So the way I understood the story of the business, though, is that what you started doing didn't end up being what the business is today. So tell us a bit more about what Eisler offers today and how that switch over came.
Yeah. So today we're from the outside, we're a manufacturing business actually. So we're offering our engineers that They upload their design to us on an online platform, and we offer them manufacturing capacities. That is, if you want a PCB, you get a PCB. If you want a kit, which is parts and PCB, that's fine. You can buy that together. If you want an assembly, you get assembly. And all of that in less than 2 minutes if you've documented, because we want you to upload your design, and then we have all the information. So we can basically, you can make the transaction and you will have it in 5 days.
Super. And so is your business focused in then more on the prototype stage or full manufacturing, or do you cover both?
So in general, we like the prototyping stage a lot because that's where the iteration happens.
Yeah.
And that's where, let's say, automation and digital actually shines the most, because there are a lot of overhead costs involved that can be automated away or made more efficient. And hence, we like to sort of be a prototyping service as well, and help you along the way to improve your product. And then sort of guide you to go to production with the iterations you ran. So we're sort of helping them from the beginning to the end, starting at around 10 euros a piece or something. So that's quite a low price in the beginning.
Super. So tell us also a little bit more about the startup process. How was it for you as an entrepreneur with your partner Patrick back at the beginning? What sort of support is available? What was useful? What was less useful in founding a business?
So it's very interesting. If you like, if you're in the startup space, there are a lot of people that want to support you. A lot of them more or less waste your time. But what's been super helpful has been the infrastructure from local maker spaces. So especially in Aachen, I think I think it's the first Fab Lab in Europe, which was founded here.
Right.
And we got a lot of support from there. Actually, those are the initial connections we made to manufacturers also went from there. And we sort of grew out of that scene. That helped a lot. And from there on, well, there is some infrastructure also in the digital services space where there are mentors, and that actually really helped. So we're very happy to be and have stayed in Aachen.
Good. That's good to hear. Now, the other topic, as we've said, is about sustainability and ethics in business. So how does sustainability fit into your business model?
Actually, I mean, we're in the end, we're an automation business. The customer doesn't really care. The customer just wants the final prototype. However, we work with local partners, and that's what automation actually helps us for. I mean, the reason why people went to Far East in the initial phases was because it was so cheap.
Yeah.
And it is still cheap if you consider like the prices. I mean, they're going up. But the thing is, if you really want like reliable supply chains, you want to be as local as possible. And that's the good thing is the side effect is that it's eco-friendly, because you have less pathway to go. It's like the manufacturers we work with are 100 kilometers away from us. So
exactly.
That's how we try to approach sustainability. I mean, everyone, and I think that's very cool that every one of us is interested in sustainability, because we only have one Earth, we have one globe, and we need to save it. And so I'm happy that we all invest in that.
That's good news, because I heard there was only one globe as well. So I'm definitely with you there. Super. Well, thanks very much for those insights and the discussion points around being a startup. It's great to see a startup be successful. So thanks very much. What we're going to do now is move on to the chip crisis in a bit more detail. And as I mentioned before, my article will be appearing in the next issue of Elektor Industry, which should be popping through your doors any moment now. And what I did was took the opportunity to talk to some industry leaders and also talk to some other insiders in the background and find out what's actually been going on and try and understand a little bit more about the chip crisis today as we see it. So the most interesting impact, I think, or the most felt impact for basic consumers is the fact that the automotive industry seems to have come to a standstill as COVID has let off a bit and we've got a bit more freedom and a bit more ability to move about. It's been very suddenly very clear that the automotive industry hasn't been very well prepared for the upturn in business And as a result, they're having a lot of trouble in building cars. And those cars are sitting in parking lots with lots of pieces missing, and the pieces are all electronics based. So what has actually happened there, and why did it occur? So the automotive industry has firstly very specific demands on the semiconductor industry because of safety reasons, for example, with airbags and automatic braking systems and other functional and safety critical systems. They typically don't just take normal consumer electronics semiconductors. They actually have parts which are qualified to a higher grade. And it isn't simply doing some extra tests. In many cases, it's actually different silicon that's being manufactured on different equipment. So as they entered the COVID crisis, because they saw that there would be less interest and less demand in buying cars, they decided to cancel many of their orders for semiconductor parts. At the same time, the consumer industry boomed because we were all working at home. We needed a new laptop. We needed a camera, headsets. We needed an additional screen. Maybe we also wanted to have more fun at home, something for the kids like a Nintendo or a PlayStation and so on and so forth. So lots more consumer electronics goods were required. And of course, those manufacturers went to the semiconductor vendors and said, hey, we need more chips. So the semiconductor industry only has a fixed capacity, and that fixed capacity is based upon the number of fabrication facilities, or as I often call them, fabs. So there's only a limited number of fabs that can manufacture chips. Those fabs themselves today, according to an interview with Wall Street Journal that was done with one of the independent foundries called Global Foundries, cost between $7 and $15 billion to build. And if you decide to build a new fab, it will take you at least 2, maybe 3 years to actually build it and get it online and actually running and producing chips. As an example here, the big piece of equipment we can see on this slide is from, I just need to check here, from ASML. That's another Dutch company. They manufacture lithographic equipment, and that's the piece of machinery that actually makes the transistors, draws them onto the semiconductor material, onto the wafers. It's a key part of the manufacturing process. But each one of those machines costs anywhere between $25 and $150 million. And on top of that, as you build your new fabrication facility, you need to make sure it's clean. That means a sub-class 1 clean room facility. That means that you have definitely less than 35.1 micron particles per cubic foot. So it's a very expensive process in making these facilities. So if you're going to spend $7 billion or more on your fabrication facility, you also need to be at the same time sure that you're going to have enough business going through that fab in order to get your money back. So most companies don't actually build them very often, of course. And there's also been a huge growth in independent foundries popping up. So rather than, for example, some of the big well-known semiconductor vendors building new capacity themselves, they can actually go to independents who share their capacity among many, many vendors. The next step of that as well is the back-end process. So once you've got your die, which are made from the semiconductor wafers, then you have your back-end assembly and final test. That's where the chip is placed into its packaging and the final tests are done. And again, that process isn't done in the fabrication facility where the chip was made. That's typically done somewhere else in lower cost countries across Asia. And they also rely on a whole bunch of contract manufacturers. And those plants, again, they cost between $200 and $500 million to build. So again, a lot of money. Now, the automotive industry has been absolutely brilliant at cutting its costs. And one of the ways it's done that is through processing a logistics chain. So the chain of supply to their manufacturing facilities called just-in-time, or JIT. Now, JIT was actually a process developed by Toyota Motor Company in the 1970s. And the idea essentially was that they would not have any stock on site. Their suppliers would bring the pieces that they needed to build a car, like tires and wheels and doors and window lifters and all the other electronic pieces, more or less as it was needed to be bolted onto the car. Now, of course, if you're building a car, you can afford to allow maybe 50 or 100 doors to be delivered in one load. and they can be built into the cars coming down right down the manufacturing process, and then maybe 4 hours later, the next 100 doors are delivered. But with semiconductors, you can't really deliver semiconductors 100 pieces at a time. If you're buying SPI EEPROMs, for example, or microcontrollers, they often come on reels where there's several thousands, if not 15,000 devices all on a reel. So those reels need to be manufactured, of course. You need 15,000 pieces, and then they're put in a storage room on site, and they remain the property of the semiconductor vendor until the manufacturer actually turns them into some piece of electronics. And that's called putting those parts in consignment. Now, of course, as the automotive industry cancelled all of its products that it thought it wouldn't need anymore, all the slots associated with manufacturing those chips were sold to other people. And the problem is that manufacturing semiconductors takes a very long time. If you want to start manufacturing a brand new product that's never been built before, it can take anywhere between 2 months and maybe even 10 months to go from placing the order to the actual part being delivered. So obviously, if you cancel the orders completely, you shouldn't be surprised if your lead time for the products later on is months and months and months and months, especially when there's no capacity because it's all being taken from elsewhere. So this is a really key important part of the semiconductor industry for those who are not so deeply ingrained in it, is keeping track of what future orders are likely to come in. And this is called forecasting. So typically the semiconductor manufacturers have a very close relationship with all of their customers. They may be distributors, they may be manufacturers, all sorts of walks of life there, of course. And they try to keep in touch with them as best as they can and say, look, we talked about this project, when do you think it's really going to go online? Because they need to be manufacturing those parts or starting the manufacture of those parts maybe half a year before they're actually needed. So they need to make sure that there's going to be enough capacity there when it comes along. And this is, a huge issue for everybody, that oftentimes customers aren't prepared to provide the forecast data because they don't want to commit themselves. Other times, like as we are now, they'll place two orders with two separate channels, maybe directly with the semiconductor vendor and then separately through a distributor or some other supplier. And all of a sudden, there's two orders for the same product in the system. So then we have to be careful that we don't manufacture too many, because then we'll end up with too many parts. Now, I spoke to Asif Chowdhury, that's the gentleman here from UTAC, and they're one of those assembly and packaging companies. And he was saying that currently the most significant issues are with just standard products in analog technologies, 200mm wafers, and also getting hold of very, very simple surface mount packages, SOIC and QFN, for example. So they're really struggling to get lead frames and also the packaging to go around them. And some of their suppliers are just simply refusing any new orders because their order books are full, their manufacturing capacity is at its limit. They just can't promise to deliver anything at all. Steve Sanghi from Microchip, for example, has put in a preferred supplier program where they're asking people to commit to year-long forecasts. On CNBC interview, Reinhard Ploss of Infineon Technologies has also said the same thing. He's never seen anything like it. Also, the rollout of 5G and millimeter wave and the move to electric vehicles has also impacted the whole thing. And we also spoke to Ralph Buhler, that's the other gentleman we see on the screen from the Conrad Electronic Group. And what he was saying was that the years of developing good business relationship with suppliers is really sort of paying out now, because as their customers are struggling to find parts, they're actually, through their good contacts and commitment, have actually managed to get stuff. So the question is, what happens next? I think the key thing is we're definitely going to be seeing problems until 2023. There is even VW, I think, made an announcement recently that they're expecting delays in automotive manufacturing until then. Otherwise, you've got to be careful. If you're not buying from well-known suppliers, there's lots of dodgy parts on the market, in the so-called grey market. And there's also component smuggling going on. There was one person, I think it was arrested in China, and he had 100 Intel CPUs all strapped to his legs. So what do? Keep our communication channels open with our suppliers, tell them what you need, talk to them regularly to find out what they have, and make sure that yeah, you'd stay on top of that side of things. It's an important and busy time for purchasing managers all over the industry. So there we go. I'm just going to quickly put up a question. We're going to do a quick survey here, and I'd just like to ask you if you have had any problems resulting from the chip crisis. Have you either seen no issues at all? Maybe you've had some component shortages. Maybe your car purchase has been delayed, or perhaps both things happened to you. You're hoping for a new car and also to complete your products, and that hasn't appeared either. So let's have a quick look there and see how everybody participates and votes on that. In the meantime, just to share some other updates about Productronica. So Productronica is running at the end of November, from the 16th to the 19th of November. It's a production, it looks at the production sector of the electronics industry, and there's also a second part to that as well, which is called Semicon, which is looking at semiconductor manufacturing. And it's an amazing exhibition. The halls are absolutely huge. You have wave soldering machines, you have surface mount pick and place machines, soldering technology, test and measurement equipment is there on display, and so forth. So if you are able to travel, if you are able to come to Munich in Germany during that time, 16th to 19th of November, come along. Elektor will be there as well, and find out more about what's going on in the sector. So we're just going to look at the results. So yes, it would seem that we've got about 10% have said that there's no they've had no impact at all, but by far the larger group is the people who've been impacted. So we've got people who've been impacted by car purchases and component shortages. So it's definitely out there with our participants, our viewers as well. So interesting to get some insight from you as well. So another big part of the Productronica is our WEEF event. This is the World Ethical Electronics Forum. It's our pioneer edition of this, run by Elektor. And what we're doing is we're talking about sustainable development goals, and we're looking at the industry and finding out what role that plays in people's businesses. We also heard today from our participants here their work that they're doing on sustainability. The Sustainable Development Goals as well, there's 17 of them defined by the UN. They include things like making sure we have clean water. So if you're doing a manufacturing process and you're using water as part of the process, that you should undertake to make sure that water is returned as clean as possible. Also making sure there's a decent work and economic growth available for employees. For example, the pandemic itself has actually caused 4 times the number of jobs to be lost than the financial crisis caused in the year 2007. So what can we do as businesses to make sure that we run our operations as that we obviously can run a successful business, but also make sure our employees are employed. And for example, in Germany, there was lots of support to make sure employees were still on the payroll and being paid rather than losing their jobs. Another goal is responsible consumption and production. So if you're interested in finding out more about what those ethical goals are, there's the website sdgs.un.org. And we will be talking about that with some industry leaders on the 18th of November at Productronica. You can either participate live and come along and see us, or if you want to, and if you're unable to turn up in person, you can join us on a web link through Click Meeting here, and that will be going out at 1 o'clock in the afternoon Central European time. We'll be talking to companies such as Philips, Land Rover and Sega, and other experts in the areas of ethics and sustainability. So there we go. Unfortunately, Fabian's had to leave us because he has another event coming on. So I'm just going to open up the Q&A session here and see if there's any questions that people want to ask. If you have any questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A box. In the meantime, if Benjamin and Felix make themselves available on the microphones again, just to start the conversation off now with, just a discussion about exhibitions. Benjamin, what's your experience been with regard to exhibitions during the pandemic. A lot of companies have come out with digital platforms. Have they worked for you, or do you think that there's nothing that can replace the in-person experience?
Yeah, we have participated the one or the other digital exhibition, and we agreed that we stopped that. It's not the same. I either go to participate a webinar where I have a limited amount of time, a specific topic, and I listen and I get information in a high density. So that's for me a webinar, and preferable with a Q&A session as you do it here in the end. A exhibition has a completely different character, in my opinion. It has to do with personal interaction, meeting, seeing each other, groups moving and changing, two people talking, and a third one joining, and that's something that is super difficult in digital. I have also participated in a meeting where you have a kind of virtual room where you have an avatar and you can move around in the room, and if you meet close to the avatars, there's a circle around, and then suddenly you have a room where you can talk and you see the videos. But honestly speaking, I mean, I'm not that old, but that's not socializing, and I cannot get hold on that. It's not the same.
Exactly. I have to agree with you totally. I've not had a good digital exhibition experience. I did have one, like a social meeting experience, which was exceptional, I thought, on a digital platform where there were breakout rooms. But that was really the exception compared to the rule. So Felix, what's it been like for you? And also as a startup, I mean, how do you go out there and stay in touch with customers without exhibitions?
So for us, actually, a lot of the customers we have is email contact, to be honest, and we've stayed in touch with them quite a lot. Also with blog posts, with mail, with discussions, sometimes a little bit of the stuff. But honestly, it's a lot of the stuff. Usually, I mean, the happy accidents happen when you're meeting each other on an exhibition or something. I mean, we've never exhibited. We've always visited to talk. So that's something that's really missing. But on the other hand, I mean, we're 100% remote usually, but everyone wanted to come back to the office because then you meet. So that's, for us, it's more like the employees actually were the important part. For the customers, we've always had very close contact, but they're more on the email and web conference anyways. So that was.
It's interesting that you say happy accidents, because I've heard that in conversations about our current work situation many times, that the biggest downside to only being available online and through digital platforms is those happy accident meetings where you bump into someone in a corridor, or you see someone while you're getting a coffee. All those have fallen away. So have you found a way to make those happy accidents happen in a different way, Felix?
It's quite hard. So for us, actually, I mean, in general, I mean, about 50% of the time everyone's remote. And during COVID, we were 100% remote. And what you realize is basically we were able to push our projects and we were able to push our development goals, which we predefined. However, if you're going into new product development and new ideas, it's quite hard if you have to always push people. Okay, you know what? Let's sit together in a webconf now, and do you have some time? I mean, it allowed us to structure things a lot better, but the thing is that the happy accident, they didn't happen that easy. Actually, I don't think they happened. It's more we sort of then had a structure in there. And we're happy to be back, to be honest.
Good. Yeah, I totally agree with you there. Benjamin, what's it been like for you? Have you figured out the happy accident challenge?
Yeah, that's definitely true. I also agree to what Felix said, and It's if you're at home, you do not meet for a coffee. You do not meet on an exhibition during buying pretzels on the Munich fair or whatever. So
Exactly.
yeah, that's a difference. We were able to let our employees communicate with each other with different video conference platforms that we gave as an option, chat platforms to stay in contact, frequent meetings that are set up that are not always connected to specific business topics. It's also a PCB roundtable that has been created, which is quite successful, and people are not mandatory asked to join, but many of them do, and there's an agenda, but quite often you see that the agenda is extending or shrinking, and yeah, so there is room for creativity and happy accidents, but in a different way, and maybe not that often as before.
I think one thing we did quite a couple of times was actually have everyone order pizza locally. And then sort of have a webcon for eating pizza together. But but you know, it's fun. But it's fun because you're at home, sitting in your office or sitting somewhere. But you know, it's
yeah, you get creative, right? We did it also, but not with pizza. But we had a virtual cocktail event with the barkeeper explaining us how to do the cocktail. Everybody got a box at home with the ingredients, and then mixing the cocktails in between some games and so on with breakout rooms. So that was really fun. But again, it's digital. It's not the same. except the cocktail, that was not digital.
So excellent. So I'm just going to go over to our Q&A. So we've got one question. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I'm only going to have time for this question. But John Chews asked us, what are your expectations of going to a fair like Productronica, and which other fairs will you attend? I think that's interesting. Benjamin, why does NCAB visit exhibitions?
There are different reasons. Productronica is maybe not the exhibition that I would exhibit. I will be there as a visitor. There are more the producers of machinery and stuff like that. We are considering to go to the Electronica next year, and there are plenty of reasons why we are considering to do so. We have grown quite a lot in the past years, but still our market share in Europe and also in Germany is not that big. So it's definitely to meet new customers. Its second reason is to socialize and to meet existing customers. Third reason is to create, of course, a brand awareness and to be present, be available for the customers. And in our opinion, we expect that there will be reinvention of these exhibitions. And reason number 4 is that the HR market at the moment is not that easy. So we have 8 positions that we want to place and want to hire new employees. Right. So that's not reason number 4 to be there as an employer.
Exactly. Yeah. And Felix, you mentioned earlier that you don't exhibit, but you go as a visitor. So what are you looking for when you're walking up and down those hallways?
So for Productronica, it's to meet partners and to meet customers. They're not usually there because it's production related, more or less.
Yeah.
However, what we usually like to do is do a separate side event and use that as an excuse to meet customers. There are quite a couple of them in Munich, so we will most likely do that.
Okay. Good stuff.
So fetch a beer.
Yeah, exactly. Super. Okay. Well, thanks very much. So we'll end the Q&A session there. Thanks to John for his great question. I think it's important to understand what those reasons are for the exhibitions. With that, I'd like to say thank you to Benjamin from NCAB. I'd like to say thank you to Fabian from from Almit, and also to Felix from Eisler. The problem is Eisler and Almit in my head are very, very similar, very close together. So yeah, thank you ever so much for your time, your participation, and providing your insights. A little bit of advertising for our next webinar. Please join us on the 2nd of December, again at the same time. That's 4 p.m. Central European time, where we will be looking at how to reduce the EMI of flyback power converters. That's going to be an interesting topic to cover, because that's one of the big challenges is always EMI and getting that right. And that often leads back to the PCB design, which we've been talking about today. So if you'd like to find out more and to register, go to elektormagazine.com/webinars. And if you want to know any more, feel free to get in touch with us. You can email us at labs@elektor.com if you've got any specific questions. Otherwise, there's a few more links about the WEEF event, the other webinars and memberships of Elektor. From my side, as well as saying thank you to our sponsors and participants today, I'd also like to thank the Elektor team, to Raoul Moreau, Diane Stadler, and Beatrice Souza, who help us out in the background and obviously aren't as visible as I am. From my side, Stuart Cording, thank you very much for participating today, for taking part and watching the webinar, and we look forward to inviting you to the next one. See you soon.
Great. And maybe thank you from our side, Stuart, for the good guidance through this webinar. It was fun to join. Thanks a lot.
Was a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thanks very much for the kind words.
Yeah.